Welcome to episode 6 of the Tech Cynics podcast. And today we're having a very special episode, special for me at least, because as I mentioned in the previous episode, I just ordered a SteamDeck. And guess what? It showed up. And I have in my hands right now the new Valve SteamDeck.
Look at that thing.
Yeah, it's pretty big. It's a chonker for sure.
So before we
start, I think we'll do some size comparisons for the benefit of folks who are watching this on video. So first, let's go back. How many years? 12, 14? I don't know. 2008. This was my first gaming handheld that I owned. This is the Sony
Big
PlayStation.
up Sony.
Sony PlayStation Portable, aka PSP. And this is tiny when compared to the deck. So the deck is so huge, I have to finagle.
You have to shift over.
Yeah, finagle. Yeah, look at that. Look at the difference in the sizes of these things. It's crazy. Also, offhand, don't ask me what the resolution of the PSP was. I want to say it's 480p back then, but yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's
Yeah.
not, yeah.
The screen size
Stack
of the
it on top.
Okay.
Don't try to scratch up your Steam Deck.
Yeah. This is
Whoa, that is massive.
Yeah. Massive. Also, when
Basically
compared,
a laptop in your hand, right? Like,
yeah,
huge.
that's exactly what this is, right? Like, so this is it compared to like my iPhone 13 Pro.
Yeah. And your iPhone 30 is closer to your PSP then.
Yes, exactly. So that's you bring up a really interesting point. So the PSP is from the era in the 2000s where all of the electronics manufacturers were obsessed with miniaturizing their electronics. Smaller was better. Phones were getting smaller, and I don't know when we hit the peak on that. Like I think it was maybe just before the first iPhone released. Was probably when we hit the miniaturization peak, and then suddenly screen real estate became an important thing with devices because you want more space to interact with the screen. You want more touch points. You want to be able to do gestures, and you can't do that on smaller screens. So yeah, literally the iPhone literally changed the game that way in making.
I'd say even more than the iPhone, it was probably the Note series.
Yes.
Because that's what people were starting to get okay with bigger form factors. I mean, the Note phones now are pretty much all display, but when it first came out, it had larger bezels, and people were generally okay with a bulkier device as long as it had all those new features. So yeah, you're right. It's from a time that everybody was trying to make things smaller.
And also specifically for the PSP, like its direct competition were the Nintendo handhelds, right? Like the DSs and stuff. And those were super portable, right? Like Nintendo went on this binge of trying to make like smaller and smaller Game Boys, enhancing the Game Boy, and then doing the DS and so on. And then Nintendo flipped it completely. They flipped the Switch and then came out with the Switch, which is much bigger. And then they literally merged their handheld division and their console division into one, like single master stroke, which... I mean, I don't know what the exact console sales figures are here in the US, but I'm pretty sure the Switch is like killing it in terms of sales. Yeah, compared to the other. It's definitely a more casual platform.
And that's always been Nintendo's thing for their platforms, and it's also more family friendly, more kid oriented. If it were, there's much more stuff for light and casual gaming on a Nintendo device than there is for PlayStation and Xbox.
But moving over back to the Switch, and I remember a couple of episodes back you asked me, like, how does this compare to the Switch? I would say don't compare it to the Switch. It's definitely for different markets. The Steam Deck is much larger. It's very ergonomic. That's one of the best things I liked about it, especially if you're like in a seated position. You could sit and game on this for hours if you wanted to. Like, so I don't know what's the easy way to show this on screen, but but basically the hand, I'm holding it the other way, obviously. So
it's got the curves.
As
if you were holding a regular controller, right?
Exactly. The curvature and like so the way this kind of molds itself into your hands. Especially, I've heard a couple of other tech commentators kind of comment about like the comfort of the deck is dependent on the size of your hands. So if you're a person with like chunkier hands in general, this deck is pretty okay. But even with smaller hands, it isn't too bad. But anyway,
what's the weight distribution like because that's going to play a lot of roles in terms of keeping the balance right and making it less painful for.
Yeah, I think they've balanced it almost perfectly. Like I feel like it's like a 50-50 on both sides. It's very comfortable. You can have extended play sessions on this. If you're lying in bed and you're holding it up like this is gonna hurt. You could do maybe half an hour. Any longer than that, like an hour or so, and then you'll slowly start feeling the blood rushing down. But that's true of pretty much any device you hold up like that, right? Like even when you hold a phone, it's way better than trying to game on a laptop in bed. Let me tell you that much. For sure. So
for sure.
Yeah. So we'll start with like the basic sort of, the story of how I got this, and we'll move on to my experiences. So July 16th of 2021, last year, is when the SteamDeck officially opened for pre-orders. I got on the pre-order queue that very day itself. I want to say I might have gotten into the queue within the first hour. I was on it. Like I set up an alert on my phone, and I had a calendar and everything to make sure that I got on to it. And then I had an initial reservation ship date of Q1 2022 that got pushed to Q2 2022. And for those who don't know, the idea behind the SteamDeck reservations was that, yes, this is available in limited quantities, but they did it much better than, say, like the Nvidia GPU release. And they leaned in heavily on the Steam community for this. So you had to be an active Steam member with at least a year on your Steam account to be able to even make a reservation. The reservation was $5, which was refundable in case you don't buy the deck. It's just $5 towards the price of the deck that you pay.
It's $5, yeah.
Yeah, it's $5. I think the way they handled it is excellent. Yes, there's a chip shortage. It's hard to make these devices, but I got the thing in hand in less than a year. And I've been trying to get a GPU for 2.5 years or so, which is more expensive. I think the
prices of those are coming down, so...
Yeah, the prices are... Yeah, I mean, I'll probably hold off for a bit because this is like a major purchase. So I have the 256 GB model so that's the mid-tier on the SteamDeck. And that costs about $530 behind taxes. If you try to buy one of these now, you're going to have to wait till October to get them. So it's not bad. And it's a good sort of middle tier. Yes, you're paying like $130 more than the base tier, which is a lot of money. But I think 256 GB is the minimum you should have just to keep things smooth. I think 64 gigs is way too small given the operating system that it uses and the fact that you'd want at least like 1 or 2 games on it. Now, I do want to mention that the SteamDeck has SD card expandability, which makes it excellent, and I'll talk about exactly how I'm using that as well. But yeah, so that was the... yeah, go ahead.
Speaking of your expansion, right? So it seems that you can get the 64 GB version and upgrade an SSD later. So
yes.
What I find online.
I understand that that's the case. Yes.
Right. So wouldn't that be better?
It would be better in the sense that, yes, it would be cheaper.
I mean, if you already had an SSD that could go into it, one of the little ones,
Yes,
then
that's
would be
also
better.
that's also an option. But the only thing that I know we mentioned this last podcast and I didn't do enough research was about whether you can still put in an NVMe SSD into the 64, because the 64 GB version is an eMMC based storage. It's not great for newer games, but it's great if you're just doing like older games, and I'll talk about that in just a few minutes as I walk through some of my talking points about the deck. So I was not
any M2 SSD in the 2280 form factor.
Okay.
2280, which is 22 millimeters wide and 80 millimeters long. Any of those will work.
Yep.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I misquoted. So the Steam Deck uses a smaller 2230 form factor, which is the small size one.
Yeah, it's a small size Steam Deck. And then there are a lot of videos of like the actual teardown. Valve has an official teardown of the Steam Deck as well.
I know. They're one of the first people who did that, right?
Yeah.
Amongst the teardowns, they're one of the first people who released the video that trains the people who would eventually do that. All the reviewers who would, get around to doing that.
Yeah.
So that was a cool move.
Yep. And they've also indicated that all parts should be available on iFixit if people need to do their own repairs. So one of the things that plagues newer generation consoles is that analog thumbsticks are really important in consoles since I guess the Xbox 360 days. It's always there since the PlayStation days. And typically this is plagued, including things like the Switch. There's something called Joy-Con drift, which is with extended play sessions or wear and tear, your joysticks don't stay centered anymore. They start drifting. It's like a hardware issue. Valve has indicated that the Joy-Con replacements are pretty easy to do by users, and they will make parts available as well. So those are all great things that they've announced. Anyway, going back to my ordering process, so I ordered it on April 28th, 2022, which is the same day that I got the email notification. When you get an email notification from Valve saying that your deck is available for purchase, you have 72 hours to respond. So not bad. Although the story is not a complete fairy tale story. When I got my Steam Deck, this is kind of what the package looked like. It's a package that was completely taped up, like on one side.
Wow. That's worrying.
It was relabeled by FedEx saying that this was a damaged/torn package. And according to FedEx, this is still not delivered, by the way. So they dropped the package off in front of my house. Luckily, I was sitting in my house by the window side, and I noticed the FedEx van show up.
It almost sounds like you were just waiting by the window, waiting for the FedEx.
Sort. I can neither confirm nor deny that, but I happened to be near the window when the FedEx van rolled up. And guess what, Govind?
Right.
The FedEx delivery driver didn't even ring my bell.
Yeah.
He left a box in front of the doorstep here in Chicago, a box that says on it Steam Deck, outside on, like, literally on the porch, on the street where anybody could have picked it up. I went down within.
Probably says your name as well.
Yeah, oh yeah, of course it says my name, which is I don't care about that.
Funny, right? Tampered box with your name on it.
Yeah. So because I was here and because I went down and picked it up, I think it was the FedEx driver wanted to avoid a confrontation with me. It's like, what is this box, right? Because it was delivered damaged. So I got the box up. Luckily, nobody else picked it up. It wasn't stolen because guess what? Steam Decks are going for $1,000 on eBay these days because nobody can buy them, right? So yeah, I was lucky. I got the box. I opened it up. Luckily, the deck ships in its own carrying case. The carrying case was sealed, so it was fine. But if you can see, the instruction sheet was ripped. And I thought everything was okay until I checked out like online, and I was supposed to get a power adapter for this thing. I didn't.
Oh.
So my power adapter is missing. Okay. I go on the r/SteamDeck subreddit, and I kind of talk about my experiences there. I contacted Valve support, and they told me to make sure that the Steam Deck is in perfect working condition. I tested out a bunch of things, and I'll talk about that in my game experiences in a second. But as of now, everything seems okay. The deck came in its carrying case, which has a plastic seal on the zipper. That plastic seal itself was intact. So nobody opened the deck case. Yeah. Well, as I was going through the subreddit for r/SteamDeck, I realized that I was the lucky one, because somebody just posted today that they got the power adapter but not the Steam Deck. And this is like literally the photo of what they posted on. Yeah. So I definitely lucked out on this one.
That's crazy.
Yeah. There are a lot of stories of issues with delivery, but literal blatant thefts going on. Apparently this person was smart enough to shoot a video of him him opening the deck. I only took pictures, but luckily it was just for the power adapter, and Steam support is shipping out a new power adapter for me.
So how are you charging it until then? It's a regular micro USB or
it's a USB-C with USB-C power delivery, so it works on
any brick will work.
Any brick will work. I don't know what the wattage requirements are. I'm currently using my MacBook USB-C power adapter, and it works fine. It works fine even through USB
delivery.
My MacBook charger, I would say, is 65 watts.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. It's not super high wattage. Okay. Those are mostly on gaming machines, I think. And Dell XPSs also have 130 watts, I think. Anyway, so that's my sort of mixed bag with this, and it's a bit of a rough start, but I count myself as the lucky one, because at least I have a fully functional intact Steam Deck and not just a power adapter. Hopefully the other person who just got a power adapter gets resolved, his situation resolved. So I got the deck in hand, and I immediately installed the Aperture Desk Job game.
The one you were speaking about last podcast.
Yeah. And this is an excellent way to kind of get into the it's a game that's set up in the Portal universe, and you are a product inspector for Aperture Science, and you have a desk which has controls that are exactly like the Steam Deck. So it's a nice way for you to kind of get to terms with how you use the different Steam Deck controls. So the desk itself, exactly. So the D-pads, the two thumbsticks, the L2 R2 controls, and the two touchpads are the main sort of items that you have.
Doesn't it also have the buttons behind the console?
That is correct. So buttons are present behind the console. Yes, they're right here. These on either side. They are the most I would say unused set of buttons, but I think the whole point is that you can map them to extra functionality. So I played this game, and the other game that I played was a game that I already had that I wanted to play on my PC, but then I didn't get around to it. And it's What Remains of Edith Finch. This is a sort of like a narrative game. People like to call these sort of like walking simulators. It's only about 2 hours long, and it's just like a casual game where a person...
kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a person called Edith Finch who explores her familial home and the stories of all of the people in her family tree, and you kind of explore them one by one by yourself. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's an excellent game, and it was it ran flawlessly on the deck. It's one of those great on Steam Deck games.
Okay.
Yeah. which is it's a good transition into talking about like what is the game status of games on deck. So Valve has been certifying games that work perfectly on the Steam Deck.
I think we spoke about this a little bit last time around.
So I'm trying to pull up the so if you go to steamdeck.com /verified, there's something called the Steam Deck compatibility program, and as you browse through Steam Deck games on the deck, there's this green check mark which tells you that, hey, this will be a great experience on the deck, and it should work right out of the box. So one of the games that I
or they might have the setting that's specific to it being used or run on a Steam Deck, right?
Yes,
so automatic
that's correct. Yeah. So I think the main thing is that the game should run flawlessly. It should not have too many visual issues of it running on a smaller screen. Like text should be reasonably easy to read and things like that. And then there should be a controller mapping that's either officially set from the developers or by a community-based controller mapping that allows you to play the game without having to do too many crazy things. Some of the other games that I got were Disco Elysium, which is a sort of like an RPG adventure game, which has a really cool art style. I've also tried playing that. I also played 2016's Doom, not Eternal, just the regular Doom from Bethesda, which is a shooter.
Right.
Which is also, it ran great. Obviously, it's not as comfortable to play on the deck compared to, I'm personally into keyboard and mouse.
Exactly. I was saying FPS, always keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
If you're used to that kind of thing, right? So I'm sure console folks would disagree with me.
But but one of the things that the deck does really well is that there is something called gyro aim. So if you rest one of your thumbs on the thumbstick without moving the thumbstick, you can just gyro aim. You can move the deck around. So you have gyroscopic aim enabled in a specific position, and it actually works quite well. So what you do is you use the thumbstick to move quickly around, and then for a more precision aim, just rest your thumb on the thumbstick and then gyro aim. And I think it'll take a little bit of getting used to, but once you have it set up, I think it's actually pretty good. Now, I don't think anybody's going to play competitive shooters on the Steam Deck. It's not designed to be that kind of, like your response time and stuff is just going to be super slow compared to.
Yeah.
Although what's really interesting is one of the verified games for deck is Apex Legends.
Legends. I saw that earlier. Interesting.
So I'm not sure like how
I don't know.
Useful that is.
I don't know if EA is gonna do any matchmaking. There's so few Steam Decks out there. So if you do matchmaking only to Steam Deck, it's not gonna be very good.
One of the big things, and it's highlighted right up front, is Elden Ring. Elden Ring runs verified on the deck. I haven't gotten a chance to do it because I'm not a glutton for punishment. I'm generally not into. I've not played any Souls games, but just hearing about the punishment that people have to endure in these Souls games, like Dark Souls style games, it's really hard. You have a lot of boss battles.
It's a lot of grind.
It's a lot of grind. Although I heard Elden Ring's nicer because it allows you to just walk away from boss battles. Apparently, so you can just walk away from a boss battle if you feel like it's too tough. Do other things, level up, and then go back to the boss.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, as opposed to
more open worldy where you have to scale up and then try to attempt a mission.
So in all, things have been great for me. So there was one deck verified game that didn't work for me, interestingly enough. And it's because it's from Ubisoft and it's Trials Fusion, if you remember. It's one of the Trials.
Playing that.
It's one of the Trials games. It's on my Steam collection. It's supposed to be a deck verified game. But one of the issues that I'm facing is that when you try to launch it, it launches the Ubisoft launcher, and I can't log in. I don't know why. The login just doesn't work. It just says that Ubisoft servers are unavailable for some reason. I tried a few network things, like tried to disable IPv6 or whatever, What's funny is that my initial login works and it asks me for my like two-factor authentication because I have that enabled on Ubisoft login.
Right.
So it asks for that two-factor code and then it just says that it can't log me in. So I have no idea why that's the case.
Is that the case for any other Ubisoft game? Just out of curiosity, if you tried it.
I'll try Far Cry 4 because I have that on. I'd have to install it, and that's the other thing. Is like getting the games on the deck means like any other system, you need to download them. Yeah, so that's obviously a little annoying, and I don't want to keep downloading 50, 60 GB games over and over again on different systems. So that's one thing. The deck allows you to stream games off of your gaming PC, and I kind of sort of tried it, but didn't get too far with that, so I haven't really fully tested that out. Like the idea was, can I just
you would
play Cyberpunk, for example, on my deck, which is streaming off of my PC and not actually running on deck. Although people have played Cyberpunk on deck, and I assume
I've seen a video.
Yeah, and it runs reasonably well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if you do like 25 FPS, 30 FPS.
Yeah, and the other thing that's really important with the deck is that it's a 1280 by 800 screen. That's kind of how it gets away by
more performance.
Exactly. Yeah. That's how you're able to play quote unquote current generation games on the deck pretty well, I might add.
What do you think about the bezels around the display? I mean, I understand it's a low-res display in that sense, but they could have done away with a little more of the bezels.
Ideally, they could have, but I think what Gabe Newell mentioned in one of his interviews was that those are some of the... It's a very well thought out design. This is not one of your sort of like...
For sure.
Handhelds that you buy from a random company based out of China. They've actually thought about like placements of the controls, the thumbsticks, the touchpads, everything about this is a very well designed, very ergonomic. People have reported excellent stuff about it. They really wanted to hit that magic $400 price point, which is unheard of for hardware that contains like this AMD APU and everything. They really wanted to hit that, and I think one of the compromises they had to make was in the screen.
Right. Or they might come out with the Pro, sort of like the Switch OLED.
They could.
Is bigger.
They could. I think
they could charge more at that point.
They could charge more at that point as well. I think the idea was they wanted to see what the reception on a hardware product like this would be, which has been excellent so far because the pre-orders are through the roof. Folks who have this on hand are really enjoying it, including myself. And I think the main thing that I kind of wanted to mention was, apart from the actual current generation games that you play on the deck, there are the one of the big things that you can do with the SteamDeck is use this as a as an emulation device. And one of the main things I think I wanted to talk about was this excellent project called EmuDeck or EmuDeck. I don't know how you pronounce it. EMUDECK, emudeck.com. And it's a one-stop shop of like, just, hey, download this thing, run it on your Steam Deck, and you're good. You get emulators for pretty much every single...
it's a pretty extensive list.
Yes.
PlayStation 3.
PS3, so PS1, PS2, Wii, GameCube, PSP, Nintendo DS, NES.
Yeah, pretty much everything that goes back all the way to the 80s.
And here's the important thing. You can emulate the Switch as well.
Oh, interesting.
So,
how would you get the games though on Switch?
On the Switch, the Switch games are on micro SD, man.
Is it?
Yep. They're on SD card at least. Okay. Yeah, the Switch doesn't use any other media format. It's just an SD card.
I thought it's all. Obviously, at that point, then you can't download anything digitally.
Yeah, and if you really wanted to find Switch games, you can. We're not saying that you should, but you could. Now, more importantly, This has become a sort of like a big issue with Nintendo. So Nintendo has been especially trying to fight this on sort of the front foot, in the sense that any of tech tubers that post videos showing Nintendo games,
how to do this,
not necessarily how to do this, but just even showing Nintendo games running on the SteamDeck, they're being taken down. It's become enough of an issue among the tech tuber community that because that kind of takedown is kind of like questionable. That
right?
Because folks have been streaming Switch games all the time on the Switch. Any video showing people playing Switch games on the Switch
really
is fine.
The case, right? That isn't what they're contesting. It's about displaying their games on a different device.
Yeah, but which is not against YouTube. It's not against YouTube terms of service, nor is that a copyright violation.
Nintendo's policy about using their games? It might be in their EULA.
It could be, but that doesn't mean you can't show something like that on YouTube.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, you could argue that, hey, I own a Switch. I own this game. I own a SteamDeck. I just took the game and put it on the Switch, and I'm showing it working on the Switch. It's more educational than anything else. So it's so much of an issue that, and Nintendo's been going against small-time YouTubers. Apparently, Linus of Linus Tech Tips has vowed to show a full Steam Deck emulation guide, including Switch emulation on the Steam Deck, and has essentially dared Nintendo to take it down because he's a much bigger YouTuber and he has more clout and he could fight those kinds of takedowns. So apparently that's in the works. So that's going to be a nice popcorn moment when that happens.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah, let's see what happens. I personally haven't tried any Switch emulation on the deck yet, but it from the videos that I have seen so far, it is very impressive. Pretty much most games work on deck. So that's like the ace in the like the whole ace in the Steam Deck versus Switch sort of question is that pretty much most
games. Why get the Switch when you can do this?
Yes, exactly. The controller layouts will work out for you. Yeah.
With EmuDeck, what about support? Who's backing that? And like, how long is that going to go on without bugs and stuff? Who's
the good thing about EmuDeck is that EmuDeck is just an installer package, and basically what they're doing is they're utilizing the huge communities for retro game emulation. Shout out to all of those communities, by the way. One of the big players in the space is RetroArch, which is sort of like a Linux-based emulator engine that works across a whole bunch of consoles. So RetroArch will do PSP, it'll do PS1, it'll do NES, it'll do Genesis, it'll do Saturn, Dreamcast, you name it. RetroArch does it. And as a result, it has a huge community behind it that's supporting it. The other great thing that EmuDeck does is that it will curate the games for you. So your games will be available on the native Steam Deck UI, sorted by game system, with the fancy cover art and all of that stuff. It harkens back to the Plex days. Yeah, go ahead.
Hold up. So this UI that you're displaying on screen is that part of the regular Steam Deck UI, or is it within the application environment for?
This is part of the regular Steam Deck UI.
Wow.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would have imagined that any emulation situation would be a step further into that application in that environment.
Absolutely. Govind, it gets better. Cool. There's no easy way for me to necessarily share the Steam Deck UI, but I'm just waiting for the Steam Deck to start up. Obviously, when you have to.
What about what about like fan noise, heating, battery, all of that stuff?
So that's the other thing I wanted to mention. Fan noise is noticeable. But the thermal management on the Steam Deck is pretty decent in the sense that no part of
Don't
your
need
hands warm up. Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
So the main fan is on the center portion of the deck, right above you, very far away from where you hold the hands. So even on extended gaming sessions, you're not gonna feel any heat. Now, if you notice on my native Steam UI, I don't know if there's an easy way to show it without.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
Maybe you can switch to the camera views where both of us there without.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
that might help.
Let me switch to that view, and
this might be better.
There you go. For the viewers, I'm just holding up the Steam Deck and showing my native UI. These are PlayStation 1 games that I've loaded up into the Steam Deck in the native UI. So I'm actually able to, if I can finagle. Whoops, and show other games. I've been playing a lot of Need for Speed Underground 1, so it's like harkening back to the NFS PlayStation 2 era, the Underground games. It is flawless going. Like it just launches straight up. The controller.
That's so long ago. Honestly, like Underground is going to run on a phone probably. If you
no. But the idea is that the emulation. Of course, it's not about the horsepower, but it's about the user experience. So it launches straight up. The controller assignments are exactly as configured because you've got all the buttons. You've got the D-pad. You've got the 4 ABXY buttons. You've got both triggers. For PlayStation emulation, it's fantastic. For Dreamcast emulation,
What about black bars? Like, because I remember those days it was 4x3. I think Underground 1 does definitely 4x3. And then does it start up that way and you have to fix it, or you can't
no. So if I remember correctly, PlayStation 2 supported widescreen natively. PlayStation 1 was standard 4x3. But what's really interesting is that on certain games, like for example, Crash Bandicoot, the emulator is configured to run Crash Bandicoot on a widescreen resolution without using 4x3, and there are hotkeys you can assign to change the resolution on the fly. But when you play it widescreen, it's really funny because you've got missing textures on the sides. So it's really weird. But let me tell you, newer generation games that support widescreen, like Need for Speed Underground and Underground 2, flawless. It's running on a much smaller screen, right? This is a 1280 by 800, so it's actually closer to what the PS2 resolutions were compared to you playing it on a much bigger screen on your desktop. So it looks great too. That's fundamental. Oh, it's unbelievable. Govind. Like,
and what's the battery life you're getting out of the emulation versus regular play?
I haven't looked at it. I haven't tested it like I can only give you like what my feelings are like. I want to say playing a game actively, you would get maybe 4 hours, 5 hours. So not great, but not bad.
That's pretty good.
That's
bad. That's like Switch territory, and this is my powerful. So
yes,
that's pretty good. And does it throttle performance when it's off charge? Or does it improve performance rather when it's on charge?
So the important thing is that you have complete control of that, in that you can set a target frame rate. Now the target frame rate works with Steam native applications. It doesn't work very well necessarily with emulation because but you can set hard GPU limit. You can tinker with this machine to your heart's content and get it working better or worse. And I think that's the main thing about the deck is it's a machine for tinkerers, for people who want to go in and play with all of these settings. Yep.
Speaking of tinkering, so MU-Deck, just going back on that, a little curious. Now, was that built for Linux and now is available for Steam Deck, or is dedicatedly built for the Steam Deck?
Just from the name, it is built for the Steam Deck. It's got Deck in the name,
right?
So it's just an installer. It uses like a bunch, probably 10-15 different open source projects to get this working. And there's another software that is also like a Plex. Yeah, it's called Emulation Station. and it's like a Plex-like interface. It's a secondary interface so some people may not want all of their emulation games showing up in the SteamDeck UI. For them, they can just open this one app called the Emulation Station Desktop Edition and have a different interface to browse through. But it's actually quite easy to get this done. You just literally download the installer, go into the desktop mode, install it, and then you have a bunch of folders on your Steam Deck where you can put the emulation ROMs, and then you open a software manager called Steam ROM Manager, which is kind of like your Plex sort of metadata manager. It'll scan through all of those directories that have the ROMs. It'll contact the database, emulation databases, get the names of each of those games, get all the metadata, and then also do the fancy cover art automatically. So
very Plex-like.
Exactly. Plex-like for your retro games. And I've started revisiting those old games now, and it's fantastic. I feel like I'm just mostly going to use this as an emulation machine and to play casual games. So there are games like Edith Finch, for example, are really casual in nature because they're walking simulators. Yes, it's 3D, but you're not really doing any intensive shooting and stuff like that. So for games like that, the deck is amazing because those games are a little annoying to sit in front of a full-fledged gaming PC and play. You want to kind of be in a more relaxed environment where you typically use your phone or something like that. Those are the kind of those kind of experiential games or casual games. You're much better off sitting on a couch or sitting in bed and playing, and that's where this thing excels. So the future is really bright for the deck, in my opinion. So it's a definite thumbs up from me. Of course, my review is glaringly positive because I dropped a lot of cash on this.
Are they shipping only to the US right now?
No, they're shipping to the UK as well, to the EU. I'm not sure about Japan. India is probably a lot harder. And it's going to take a while before I think general availability is good enough that you could just show up on steampowered.com and just download, order one offhand. But this is great. I also kind of wanted to mention a few things about my experiences with gaming. This is running Linux, right? This is running Arch-based version of Linux. Valve calls it SteamOS because it's uniquely tailored for the Steam Deck.
Yeah.
It supports instant suspend resume, which is fantastic. So you could literally turn off the deck in the middle of a game, turn it on, and you'll resume right back where you were. I'm sure that is a feature that Valve wanted to work on really hard, and the fact that it works on at least on deck verified games, is excellent.
It's very important because when you're talking portability, you might find yourself in scenarios where you need to quickly take a break, or you might be at the airport, for example. You're waiting at your gate, and then just turn off and then walk over, board the flight, and then continue where you left off without much of a load time experience.
Absolutely. So I definitely want to give a shout out to probably tens of thousands of people who are responsible for this, because it's not just Valve. What the Steam Deck has achieved is a culmination of over 20 years of work that people in several communities have been doing to get gaming working on Linux. So if I put my old person hat on and take you back to 2005, 2006, when I was in undergrad, I did my undergrad back in India. I was in Kerala at the time. And back then there was a very active free software movement that was convincing people. It was partly technical and partly political as well, because people were talking about the dangers of monopolistic practices of different companies, right? And the biggest monopoly that there was back then was Microsoft, and Windows was running on every machine. And what happened was, Microsoft never really targeted individual users, and they don't do anymore. But they would target organizations like companies and colleges, things like that. Anybody that had more than, say, 10 or 15 computers running pirated versions of of Windows. And they would target them and then tell them that you need to pay for these. And, it was obviously very expensive back then. Like, you'd have to pay 3,000, 4,000 rupees per machine, per seat, for a license for Windows. Anyway, so as a result of that, there was a very active free software movement. And then colleges and, even the government, for that matter, actively promoted Linux everywhere. So it was a real big movement. It was like a thing that everybody was going around talking about Linux. I also participated in that movement in the sense that I remember ordering 200 CDs of Ubuntu from Canonical, and they actually shipped a huge box of 200 CDs all the way to Kerala from the Netherlands for free, just to promote Ubuntu. Ubuntu was in its early days back then. They had some Mark Shuttleworth money. Ubuntu is the one of the de facto Linux distributions these days. Anybody doing any kind of work on Linux, especially if it's new, if they're working in the cloud, you're mostly going to be running Ubuntu. It's one of the most stable distributions. Anyway, so I remember preaching about Linux, but then I always ran Windows on my machines, and that kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. Like, they were like, "Whoa, what's wrong with you? Why are you still using this monopolistic operating system from a monopolistic company or whatever?" And I still run Windows, by the way, on most machines. I do run Linux on other machines as well. I just told them one word. I told them gaming. It's like, I play a lot of video games. I have a laptop with a GPU in it. I want to play games. And Windows is the only way to play games. Back then, they would show me some of these niche games on Linux. There was a game called Tux Racer, which is like this. It was a 3D game. It was impressive, but you couldn't get any games running on Linux back then. That was 15, 16, 17 years, whatever, however many years, number of years ago. And since those days, Govind, there was a project called Wine, which is the Windows emulator on Linux. They have been trying to get Windows applications running on Linux, more than 20 years ago. So Wine has been an active project that's been running all of these years with all of these volunteers and all of these supporters, writing code for Wine. Valve comes in and says, you know what, we're going to build on top of Wine. And then they built the Proton system. Proton is the sort of like the Windows emulator for Linux. And it's completely open source. You don't have to buy a SteamDeck for this. If you ran Linux on any machine, you can download Steam and you can run Windows games in Linux now using Proton. And the fact that it's gotten so good that you can run AAA games through the Proton compatibility layer on Linux is just absolutely mind-blowing. So it's a real triumph of like the community and all of these people who have worked tirelessly over the years that actually made this happen. And the fact that Valve is smart enough to leverage and actively participate in that community while giving back and not locking anything down is just absolutely commendable. And I just have to call that out. It's crazy. It's things like that makes this possible, that kind of disrupt the whole space. So you better believe that it's not just the hardware, the software, the compatibility layers, the emulation community, it's making all of the big companies kind of sweat a little bit. Nintendo for sure. Given that you can play Switch games on this.
I think a lot of it also rings true with the community support, right?
Yeah.
So you have a lot of these people who want to be involved, and Sony or Microsoft or Nintendo, for that matter, they wouldn't be open to taking that as an input, right?
Yes.
So they don't necessarily turn to the community to help them with their development requirements or to improve their kind of things, right? So the thing with Valve is what they've done is kind of motivate that crowd to improve their ecosystem, which is, in the end, everybody benefits, right? So
absolutely.
Valve puts out a good product and everybody else who wants it uses a better product in the end of the day.
I also want to shout out to a company that was obviously initially very anti-competitive, didn't want to play nice with any of this, but has completely changed their tune under Satya Nadella, and that's Microsoft. So Microsoft actually, specifically for the SteamDeck, Microsoft has officially supported xCloud gaming with the SteamDeck now. So you can stream your Xbox Game Pass games. You can stream right now. They've not made any commitments for native execution of Game Pass on the Steam Deck. Valve has indicated that they're willing to work with Microsoft on that. But if you can get Game Pass games working on Steam Deck without having to install Windows, that'll be huge. The other thing that I found out and tested and verified that it works on Steam Deck is the Epic Game Launcher.
Really? Oh yeah, I did see a video about that.
Yes.
How to get Epic Launcher. Yeah, it's a bit of a workaround, but it can work. Yeah.
So there's two routes to do this for the Steam Deck. One is you can install Epic Game Launcher from Steam using Proton because it runs Windows applications. The UI isn't great.
Yeah, exactly. So that's
the UI isn't great. The other way is that there's a new open source launcher for Epic Games called Heroic Games Launcher. And you can install that and then log into Epic Games and then install your Epic Games. Now the games that confirmed don't work on the deck, and Epic has not indicated whether they'll support it or not, is like the big wigs like Fortnite, for example, and it's because of anti-cheat.
I mean, they've got to look at anti-cheat and exactly.
Now I think if Epic takes a stand, because I mean it's a free-to-play game, right? Like you'd want more people to be engaged in the game. There's almost no reason for them to not support it, apart from the fact that it's they wanted to go through the Epic Games Launcher. But release a Linux version of the Epic Games Launcher. Release the anti-cheat for Fortnite on Linux. Valve will be totally fine. Valve is completely fine having non-Steam games on the deck. So that's all they have to do.
No, but again, if you want, you're talking about the tinkerers with versus the non-tinkerers, right?
Sure.
You're talking about a scenario where the tinkerers would get, okay, fine, this is available to us, let's play. But the thing is, the tinkerers would have done that workaround anyway. Like they don't need that support. What they would need, what regular folk would need, is for Epic Games to just host Fortnite on the Steam Deck's, available
on Steam,
on Steam, right?
Literally
so
on Steam,
if they list it, exactly, then they get more for follow just from that one device. But other than that, I don't think they're going to work, because it probably goes against a lot of their guidelines of how they should be doing things. Speaking of Xbox though, just off topic, so Xbox is coming out with a streaming device and a smart TV app. So it's going to be a dedicated streaming device. So just for xCloud.
So it's like the Nvidia Shield.
A Fire Stick.
Or like the Nvidia Shield.
Like that. Yeah. Exactly.
Nice.
So
or Stadia.
They're apparently in the works.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Let's see what happens there. I mean, given that a lot of people have good broadband nowadays, that might be the future there. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I get lag and everything, but for casual games, definitely.
Oh yeah, for sure. So from what I've seen, I've not personally experienced cloud streaming yet. And if you're on Game Pass, if you level up to the ultimate tier, you get xCloud access. I definitely may try it for a month or so. But from what I've heard of all of the different game streaming options, people have the most positive reception for xCloud. For Xbox's game stream service. This is probably tied to the fact that Microsoft is a huge company with a lot of money, but more importantly, they have the cloud resources. They have Azure backend that's all over the globe to make this happen if they wanted to, and I think they're leaning heavily into it.
Yeah. So I've seen this in the works on my brother's phone. So he did some game streaming while he was here, and was just playing casually on his phone. But there was a bit of a lag. But again, then you got to take into account servers, where your actual location is, where you're trying to stream it. He was trying to use it in India. It probably accounted for some of the lag, but it was perfectly playable. I mean, if you're playing some kind of casual
games,
definitely playable, or even driving.
What's really interesting is that it's usually not your internet connection. I mean, at least in the US, in India, it could be, but it's mostly just Wi-Fi. that can cause a lot of hiccups with streaming. Because I've personally noticed that, like, I've tried to stream from my own machine to handheld devices. Like, I have a Steam Link device, and Wi-Fi is not great. Like, unless you have extremely robust Wi-Fi, it's kind of hard. So that the game changer there, Govind, I would say, for if you're peering out 10 years, 5-10 years in the future, is if you have 5G everywhere. That's where things can readily change. 5G offers wireless, like Wi-Fi equivalent speeds everywhere, as long as the coverage is good, and the coverage is growing. And it's a real game changer. I can see game streaming plus 5G becoming like a
network
big
speeds. I would for mobile network internet speeds, I would argue India's possibly a little better than a lot of places in the US even right now.
It was until 5G, the 5G rollout happened.
Well, it's again, how widespread is 5G in the US?
So if you're in urban centers, yes, like, Chicago is got pretty good 5G coverage. It's good enough, Govind, that Verizon and T-Mobile in the US are now selling 5G home routers. And it's a big disruptor in this space because in the US, because of sort of like these crazy rules about how utilities work, home internet is mostly monopolized. So if you take an apartment for rent here in Chicago, for example, you're usually stuck with a single internet service provider because of the rules that dictate how people can reuse telephone poles and things like that. It's all been monopolized. So Comcast is basically taken over that entire
probably
space.
Already they've done wiring for the building as well.
Exactly.
It's similar for, even here in bigger communities, it's similar. You're stuck with one or two suppliers.
Yeah, for bigger communities, most other places, people are kind of willing to just like pull a wire to a house, right? Like that's kind of how it works, And there isn't really much fights. Like, people will just reuse the electric poles even though they don't own them. Like it's not really codified into law. Over here, all of that is codified into law, and like, different municipalities have different rules about who can reuse utility poles and things. It's a real mess, not to mention a lot of political lobbying that went behind all of this exclusivity. So different internet companies have just carved out different sections of the map and said, okay, this is Comcast territory, this is Spectrum territory, this is AT&T territory. Google tried to disrupt this with Google Fiber, but they ran into these roadblocks set up by all of these cable companies, so they can't muscle in on other people's territories. 5G is a real disruptor in the space because they're offering those kinds of speeds. They're undercutting all these guys in price. They're as of now, the network loads are decent enough that they're able to pull this off. Most importantly, Govind, they're allowing try before you buy. So that's something that you can't really do with other internet providers here. Here you have to sign like a long-term lease and say, yeah, I'm taking internet for like a year and that's what will guarantee this rate for me. But like with Verizon and T-Mobile, you can say, you know what, let me try for 2 weeks. Let me see what the speeds are like. If I'm happy with it, I'll continue with the service, or I'll just return the box.
Right, because there isn't much work for them, right? Like I'm assuming this is picking up 5G signal.
Yep, absolutely.
Off just the air and then just broadcasting it internally.
Exactly.
Yeah, so there isn't any work involved for them, so why not?
Yeah, so the cable companies are really sweating right now. And I see a lot of ads for this, and I've seen like, I feel like increasingly, like especially people who are fed up with Comcast, T-Mobile is guaranteeing a lifetime rate for 5G home internet. Okay. I think it's like $40 or $50, but lifetime, which is a big deal for the US because price creep is a big problem here. Like,
well, it might be, but here's the thing, right? What is the trend like over there in terms of price creep? Like, is it always going up, or is
always
it because of okay, so I've had a different experience here, so that's why I bring it up. It's if things become more widely available, then the competitive space becomes that way, that they have to bring the price down. but not always do you get the benefits of bringing your rates back to a lower rate, right? So you might be stuck on the older plan, which is actually turning out more expensive for you. Which has happened to me once, because that's how things roll here.
And it's happening.
They don't tell you.
And it's happening in India with the mobile data space, right? Because of the geo price creep has started to happen.
I had this happen to me with a fiber connection off of BSNL once, where initially where I used to live, they were the only provider for fiber. And the week they started rolling out fiber, I had fiber, right?
Okay.
And that was on a very premium plan.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, that's the only thing you can get at that speed. So let's just do it. Let's get it for a year and see what happens. 2 years later, nobody's monitoring bills at this point. We're just paying it as routine.
Yes.
And BSNL doesn't actually come and tell you that they've revised plans. That thing that you're paying for is actually half rate now. You just had to go tell them that you want to be on that plan now.
BSNL does this all the time because they silently update their plans, but they never bother changing the customer or even informing the customer. Like, yes, I understand not changing the customer's plan, but they don't inform the customer either. And I have a huge bone to pick with BSNL when it comes to ad injection as well. I don't know if you've suffered through ad injection over HTTP with BSNL. It's a thing they do in Kerala apparently. If you visit any website that's not non-HTTPS, BSNL first injects an ad and then they show you the website, which is downright illegal.
I love that happening.
Which is downright illegal. And for listeners of the podcast who are based in India who have this issue with BSNL, the one way you can opt out of this is to actually raise a public grievance with the government. But you can do it online. So it's called CP Grams, a centralized, I think, public grievance system or something. That's the only way I could get rid of it. But it was super annoying.
But were you on a BSNL plan when that happened?
Yep, I was on a BSNL plan.
Okay. So this only applies to people. I'm no longer a BSNL customer. So it doesn't really affect me.
Yeah. This is for So this is BSNL ad injection, and it's basically it's supposed to be illegal because this breaks the internet, right? Like, this is a man-in-the-middle attack on your internet, and. One of the Internet Freedom Foundation in India has been actively rallying against this. And I just wanted to share the screen real quick. They're pretty active on Reddit. But yeah, this is literal code injection, basically.
Is this recent?
As of December, it was still active. Like, this has been going on for years. I don't know if you were you using a different DNS server? Were you using Google DNS, OpenDNS?
This story is from about a year and a half ago. It didn't really affect me. I've never noticed this, actually. Yeah. I guess it was just me not going to HTTPS sites.
Yeah. So this injection obviously doesn't work on HTTPS because, that's certificate enforced and things like that. But for folks who do face this problem, if you're based in India, just... issue a grievance on the public grievance, just search for grievance.
Or stop using BSNL. Just switch over to a different
if you have the option. Yeah. Not everybody has that option.
Airtel and Jio is pretty widespread now.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's the situation with that. But speaking of...
big tangent over there. We went off weird tangent over there.
Uh-huh. Yeah, speaking of the payments, we'll move on to the other topics. But speaking of payments and recurring payments, Apple has just announced that they're going to stop accepting debit credit cards for subscriptions and app purchases in India. Big news that came out of India, actually. And this is obviously going to annoy the other card companies. So this is a big fintech story. And I think, Govind, you should walk us through this.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my experience and when I realized this. And it kind of lines up. I didn't really follow the story at the time. So this was back in September, October-ish of last year, 2021, where the RBI issued a new policy on storage of credit card information of customers for all e-commerce platforms.
Yeah.
So that's now coming into effect.
Yeah.
You have that there. So there are certain policies that they want to enforce, and a lot of that means, basically boiling it down, is that whatever recurring payment that you've set up is now going to require an intervention of yours to continue that. In October, why I got stuck with this was I was trying to upgrade my Google One plan, and it needed a credit card to be entered for billing purposes, and I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't accepting my credit card.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is weird. And the error it gave was your country does not support this. And I was like, okay, this is really weird. And I tried a bunch of cards that I have. None of them worked. I was like, okay, this is really weird and concerning. But I had to upgrade at the time. So I figured I'd work around. I bought a Play Store coupon or token, or whatever you call that. And then just use the Play Store coupon to kind of get that service that I wanted. So it looks like the RBI is looking at options of tokenization for credit card information storage. So come July, I believe, Amazon or Flipkart or any other e-commerce platform is not going to be able to store your credit card information straight up. They're going to have to tokenize it in some form. And I mean, just for compliance purposes. There is also talks of, you having to intervene in terms of making that authorization of payment. So you have to apparently be notified 5 days ahead of time if it's a payment over 5,000 or something like that. And then you have to you have to be notified for any transaction. And if it's over 5,000, there's an OTP component that is involved. But there's still an intervention that you have to do to make your recurring subscription to continue. So a lot of these platforms are now switching over to annual subscriptions because people don't want to deal with this on a monthly basis. So you might see a lot of the subscription-based plans going more annual and having benefits even for subscribing to annual plans, besides just the discounts that come with it. So let's see how this goes. I mean, you can see there's an article right there about after 6 months of the deadline, it's still causing grievances.
Yes.
I haven't read too much into this, to be honest, and honestly, it's just one of those things that people decide to do without much thought. That
consultation with all the stakeholders involved.
Consultation.
This is super interesting because this is supposed to be a pro-consumer move, right? The idea that RBI wanted to do
safeguard your money so you don't get scammed.
Yes. But this has rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So obviously it has rubbed businesses the wrong way because you're introducing a payment barrier, right? Especially a recurring payment barrier, which is
one of the collections issues for.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Which is why basically Apple just said, we're not going to deal with any of this. You can still make payments using UPI or net banking, but we're just not going to support these card rules. I'm sure card companies are furious, especially the non-RuPay cards, right? They've already had a lot of gripes with India past couple of years, given that all of these wins were changing. So in a way, it's great because we're not beholden to foreign payment networks. Our payment networks are independent. So we're moving to that sort of the Chinese model that way. The problem, Govind, is that it's not always great for consumers necessarily.
It isn't, because I'm a consumer and I'm pissed off. Like, I don't want to deal with this every month. Like, there's a reason why I went recurring payment. Like, I don't want to deal with this. This should be automated for me, but I just want the choice to cancel before it's annual. That's it. Like, that's the only reason I chose monthly is because I want a choice.
Ideally, there should have been like some single stage intervention that says, okay, I authorize this and I understand the risks involved, but I want to make this so and so, and then there's an opt-in or an opt-out.
Exactly. And if you can set an expiry on when that approval of yours, authorization of yours, that's a much better way to do it. Like, for 6 months, don't ask me.
Yeah,
that's a better way to do this.
I think the reason is also just because the number of sort of scams that could possibly happen.
Yeah, scams and people generally forgetting to do cancellations and people being more,
complaining.
Say this carefully. Complaining and not so diligent with their use of credit cards and cards in general. So I think that's what it has, and this is sort of the government's way of kind of
trying to
saying, hey, we want to protect you guys, but here's a little bit of annoyance that comes along with it.
Govind, this has mushroomed an entire industry here in the US of like, here are startups that remind you of all of the things that you're paying for every month, right? There are fintech companies based out of the US that peer into your payment. You give them access to your payment history. Again, that's valuable data that you're giving up. But what they'll do is they'll just analyze the spends and they're like, are you really watching Netflix? You could save $10 a month, So that's a huge space of like startups here in the US that are based off of this. So the payment philosophies across the US and India are so diametrically opposite that way. And it makes sense, right? Like, it is consumer focused in India, but then you could argue being overzealous in that focus of security and payments and like, those kinds of things that, you'll actually have companies pushing back on the RBI and saying, hey, wait a second, you're actually putting the growth of our company in jeopardy because of this, right? And you shouldn't make it an annoyance for customers to make recurring payments. So we'll see how this pans out. Apple, this is a small enough market for Apple to just be like, nope. Well, if you want to make a payment, just use UPI or net banking. I don't want to deal with any of the card
Which
troubles.
Is fine if you think about it. Everybody's, like we spoke about last time, everybody's got some kind of UPI platform that they're using.
Yeah.
And that should be fair enough. Yeah. But again, is this going to be, one of those things where you have to authorize payments?
Yeah, I don't know how recurring payments on UPI work necessarily. So that's another thing.
Something to explore.
Yeah.
Because if that can be set up to be recurring without intervention, then okay.
But, that's one of those things that the foreign card companies will come back and say, hey, wait a second. Like, this is not a level playing field now. And, it's... You can argue whether you should make it a level playing field or not. Yeah.
I mean, this is very, I'd say, odd because there is still the banking system where you can put in standing instructions for payments.
That is true.
All your investments and everything like that.
Yep.
So why isn't this classified as similar things where you're still making the choice?
So RBI issued another set of new rules for standing instructions as of the beginning of this year, if I remember correctly. I don't do recurring payments or standing instructions, but apparently you have to reauthorize them. So RBI is going heavily against these recurring payments, which is weird. For a growing economy, you want to try to make things as smooth as possible for your businesses as well. But again, it's the kinds of scams and those kinds of things that can happen. So that's the other argument. Like, how much of babysitting should the government do as opposed to consumer education, right? Like getting consumers educated on these things and it's weird. But
this is more protection or consumer protection.
Yeah, it's consumer protection. But you don't want to go
to the wrong end of things.
You don't want to go into nanny state either, right? Yeah. So those are the two arguments for
MasterCard is. They've been blocked from issuing new cards.
Because of last year, I think. And that's because of the data storage requirements, and that India enforcing this idea that all payments should be processed in India.
Stuff that.
Yeah, again, there are a lot of other factors in play here, just national security and all kinds of things, and you can make arguments on either side. Ease of doing business is something we generally should aspire to, and having overly protective measures this way is not necessarily a good thing. I'll tell you one victim of all of this. Like, since the introduction of RuPay through to introduction of UPI, the one thing I've noticed that has become a real problem in India is POS payments on foreign credit cards have suffered immensely. What has now happened is that there's this bifurcation in payment systems that has happened as a result of the introduction of RuPay and UPI, that the cheaper POS terminals that you can buy, that most merchants are now buying, are just Paytm terminals, and they just flat out do not support foreign credit cards anymore. 10 years back, if you showed up at an establishment with a foreign credit card, odds are they would just work straight out of the box because they would just accept Visa,
they were
MasterCard.
on Visa or MasterCard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But now what has happened as a result of UPI and RuPay, is that there's a bifurcation, and you can use Visa and MasterCards only if they're issued in India. So there's just...
You bring up a very good point, like for tourists or people coming from outside of the country. It's going to be very annoying to deal with all this when they come into India.
You know what NCPI should do ASAP is have
a wallet
UPI wallets. Just have UPI wallets, non-bank account backed UPI wallets that work with foreign providers.
Or you pay through your credit card there and then load up your wallet. That should work.
Just have support for that. Like, yes, you will raise issues of like, tracking or whatever, but you need to make lives of tourists coming into India easier. This is now forcing them all to go back to cash, and it's really annoying. So the number of places where my foreign credit card hasn't worked when I shop around in India is starting to increase steadily as a result of this. Yeah. All right.
So another point on this one was revenue leakage for a lot of the companies where this recurring payments being stopped has actually impacted a lot of business in terms of people not actually authorizing their recurring payments. They've chosen not to do that. So some of the stats that you see over here is 30 to 40% actually took steps to get their payments on track, which means about 60 to 70% of people didn't do that on time, which means that's a lot of revenue leakage for all these companies who are relying on these recurring payments to come in. So it must be a headache for all these companies to track revenue and projections when these kind of things happen.
And that, and the amount of additional notifications, like already Zomato is like infamous for spamming consumer phones with notifications like, hey, it's Mother's Day, don't you miss your mom's
I get
cooking?
These funny ones.
Yeah. So like just the amount of added,
very aggressive with that.
Just the amount of added notifications just for all of this stuff. UPI was pretty well architected and thought through, a very nice payments interface. But these are random RBI rules. Like, I'm willing to bet it's 5 people and a director who signed off on this without talking to anybody. Which is the nature of a lot of decisions that are happening in India these days that just literally affect millions of people, but aren't really thought through. So
speaking of UPI, this other player that's coming into the space, called ONDC.
Okay.
Let
me see.
Haven't really done much research on this.
Okay.
It just came up. Well, it's been in the works for a few months, but recently it's been in the news over the past week. It's got an UPI type protocol, it says, for medium and small local retailers.
Interesting.
You've got that there.
I've just got like their Twitter feed up on screen for those who are watching the video podcast. But yeah, interesting. Yeah, maybe something to keep an eye on. It could be pushback from like the other card companies, right? Who have sort of morphed themselves into a consortium and then said, we need to push for like a more open payments system that's not biased towards like RuPay or individual bank accounts. So it's possible. It's one of those lobbying
groups.
Put
up a couple of URLs next to that talking point that we have.
Oh, I see. Yeah, let me pick those up. But yeah, interesting. This is again an article from FinShots. It's a very famous like sort of financial. They do a lot of these infographics, and I remember like social media stories about fintech in India. But yeah, ONDC is supposedly one of those sort of competing. Looks like they would actively be competing against UPI or maybe
with UPI. Yeah, in the same space.
I see. I'm willing to bet that it's.
There's a little more of architecture infographic on the other link that I posted.
Okay,
maybe that gives us clarity.
Yeah.
ONDC's network-centric model. Blah blah blah. Okay.
Yeah, can they overcome UPI's challenges?
Scroll. So scroll all the way down.
Yeah. Oh, I see.
There we
Okay. Using quote unquote open protocols and open APIs as opposed to a proprietary protocol. Now, you see, there's a lot of language being used here. And they say proprietary to mean not good, but proprietary, or in this case, is owned by the government, which is supposedly by the people. So, it's pushback against UPI and trying to wrest control away from the government. So this will be interesting to see what happens here. Like, I don't know who are the people pushing this, but I'm willing to bet that it's the other card consortium people, right? Like it's the Visa, MasterCard, and a bunch of other people kind of banding together and trying to get some mind space behind this idea, and then talking to, it's useful, right? You can always kind of go to like these startup companies that are, having their growth hampered by these decisions, unilateral decisions made by RBI and NCPI on payments, that they'll be like, we want to move out.
Being introduced by the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade. So this is government linked.
It says that, but
it's all the way at the top.
Oh, I see.
All the way at the top.
I see. Let me see. Huh. Interesting. I'd have to look that up. Because that's the first I'm hearing.
We need more information.
Yeah, it's first I'm hearing of that. Okay, it is a government department. Okay, I see. So now there's government infighting. It's the Ministry of Finance versus the Ministry of Promotion of Industry and Trade or whatever. But yeah, this is going to be interesting to see. Yeah. Anyway.
Right.
Let's see. Moving on. There was a big article actually that came out this week among all the sort of like the technical folks about Nvidia.
Single sign-on? No.
No, Nvidia being fined. So this is interesting. So Nvidia had obviously record sales last year. Typically, as a publicly traded company, they need to give, a breakdown of their revenues and, in their quarterly reports as required by the government. So, you can argue both ways on this. So what happened was Nvidia failed to disclose that their uptick in gaming revenue was actually, a result of people buying the GPUs for crypto mining, because crypto miners were buying gaming GPUs. And as a result, the SEC here in the US has fined Nvidia $5.5 million for failing to disclose that. Now, Nvidia shills or Nvidia supporters will come back and say, hey, wait a second. How was Nvidia supposed to know that a single customer ordering 500 RTX 3080 GPUs was not buying it for gaming? Right? But rest assured...
I'm sure they can pull usage stats.
Rest assured, Nvidia knows like what percentage of their GPUs are going to scalpers, they have a good enough idea through their distribution networks of like how much actually ended up in mining rigs and how.
Exactly. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure that out.
So the idea,
every time you open up any game, it's going to log what GPU you're using, and Nvidia gets a piece of that information.
I'm pretty sure. I don't know how much telemetry Nvidia collects through hours. I'm sure they collect a lot.
I'm sure they do.
I'm sure they do. Yeah.
Forget that. Like Steam has all their information collection. You don't think Nvidia is collecting information about their GPU spread across the globe?
I'm pretty sure there's enough telemetry that's going on that will give Nvidia that information if they wanted to, right? So
exactly.
So as a result, the SEC fined them for not disclosing that, because that kind of information is important information to investors, because that puts their earnings information in context of like, okay, how much of that earnings was because of this, crypto boom that happened last year. And, you can make some educated guesses about how much of that will be retained this year, given that, crypto might be doing better or not better. Yeah.
Not better. Speaking of crypto, Bored Ape, you might know about this. It's pretty popular NFT collection by.
I'm readying myself to to talk about this. Yeah.
So Bored Ape Yacht Club, they have an NFT series.
Yes.
And they're now coming out with a game called Other Side.
Of course they are. Yeah.
Right. So Other Side is also going to have some land elements to it, which you can buy as NFTs.
Of course you
and
can.
Surprise, surprise, people have lost millions trying to buy up land in virtual games.
You know, I have no
The weird part is this game is not even out. They're pre-buying land and they've lost money.
If you spoke to anybody who actually plays video games, like most people will tell you that pre-ordering games is a bad idea. But pre-ordering game DLC, yeah, like let's say game DLC, like land in like a metaverse game is literally DLC, right? Like it's micro. So pre-ordering microtransaction DLC in a game is literally the stupidest thing I've heard of. And people who've lost money on this deserve to lose money. I think, you know what, this is good, right? The more money people lose in schemes like this, the more convinced the people will be that, hey, wait a second, I don't think like the stuff that crypto bros are shilling actually makes financial sense. And as a result, people lose money. Yeah, I think all of this is going to come to a head at some point, right? Yeah, it's not going to be a good thing.
Let's play up that game trailer that I have the URL to there.
Yeah,
just for kicks.
At the expense of giving it more airtime than it should, but like, yeah, sure. Like let me pull that up. Yeah, I'm pulling up that. So this is the Kotaku URL that you shared.
Scroll down a bit, and the YouTube video is on that.
Yeah. So let me make sure I don't have audio enabled. Yeah. Okay. So, oh wow. Okay, sure. Yeah, it's literally bored apes sitting around being bored. Yeah.
I'm just trying to imagine why you would buy land in this game. I'm trying to figure it out.
Because you're a bored ape? Maybe. I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know, man. So, like we talked about this a couple of episodes back, right, on our podcast. The fact that what was supposedly the world's most expensive / valuable NFT got nowhere close to what that introductory price was. The NFT of the world's first tweet. That was the world's most visible NFT too, right? Like it was ferreted around by all the media companies. Everybody kind of talked about it. And the fact that NFT couldn't find a buyer anywhere close to whatever the reserve price was, should tell you that this is Beanie Babies all over again, right? Oh, they've got CryptoPunks as well. Oh man. So it's the NFT metaverse, dear Lord.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's crazy. More NFT news. Moving on from this, Hyundai.
Oh God.
Is launching a series of NFTs.
Sure.
Man, when everybody's jumping on the bandwagon, and similar stories with
everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of introducing NFTs. I don't think everybody's jumping on the bandwagon of buying NFTs. Yeah.
Introducing anything into the Web3 space is really where it's at right now. Google, moving quickly away from the Hyundai topic, Google is introducing a new team that is going to focus entirely on Web3. And in the article, if you open up that CNBC link, it says very clearly, in quotes, we're just doing this because, well, I'm paraphrasing, but we're just doing this because it's where the trend is at. Like, we'll do this until it's trendy.
So now,
if you scroll down,
so now it's like all the big tech companies have FOMO at this point.
Exactly, and there you go. That's a quote right there. We're not trying to be part of the cryptocurrency wave directly. We're providing technologies for companies to take advantage of distributed nature of Web3 and so on, right? So that's basically they're banking on the fact that some of these companies are going to need back-end support on some level.
Yeah,
and they're there to save the day, I guess, or make a few bucks.
No, yeah, make money on it, basically. Like, oh, guess what? All of this expensive compute that you need to keep this blockchain going, you're going to have to, you need it somewhere. Well, say hello to our cloud, and then you've circled back and you've come back to Web 2.0, basically. There's this amazing statement that I heard over the week. This is attributed to a security researcher called Cory Doctorow. He's a bit of a political figure. But he's basically said, here's how you critically evaluate any sort of like startup that purports to using blockchain or Web3 to solve a problem. So here's how you think about it. If your problem plus blockchain equals the same problem minus blockchain, that means blockchain equals 0. Anything. Yeah, blockchain is not providing any solution for that problem. It's like, hey, here's this new problem. Guess what? We're going to solve it because we're going to add a blockchain to it. It didn't solve anything. It just introduced this new threat model saying that, hey, guess what? You know what? Can you really trust everybody that's involved here? Oh, no, you can't. So here's why we're using a blockchain for this. Like, there was a beautiful example of this idea of using blockchain in a new context, and it boils down to fair trade organic produce. All right, so there was this company, there was a startup that was saying,
to see how this is linked.
So the idea is that there's a lot of like tomfoolery happening in the organic space, right? Like organic food space. People can relabel food however they want. How can you really trust that this apple that you pick up
is an apple
or is organic? So there was this startup that took a lot of money from the European Union or whatever. I don't have the name off the top of my head, but this was mentioned by Cory Doctorow. It was like, okay, so what they do is that anytime a produce is like, there's this batch of organic produce that gets generated. Like, this company goes in and verifies that and then puts that produce in the blockchain. Right, and every time that pallet of produce moves around, the blockchain gets updated. So guess there's a barcode on every piece of fruit, and you scan it using their app. It'll tell you whether that the apple is organic or not, because it has been blockchain verified. So somebody like Cory went to this person and said, okay, so how do I trust any of this? Like, how do I trust the app? And then the person's like, oh, you just have to trust us then. That is. So what did the blockchain do? You could have just had like a database of organic produce. Like, it's the same app. It's the same thing.
Say, what is different about this than just a regular inventory management system that's going to spit out the same information?
Exactly. The moment you introduce a trust element of some party involved, even if it's the same party that's selling you the blockchain, then your blockchain is useless because you have to trust somebody at the end. That's my adage for anybody trying to sell you a Web3 solution. Like, just ask, who do you have to trust? Do you need to trust this company that's selling you this Web3 solution? Why can't you just use a regular database? And immediately their whole blockchain argument will be reduced to dust. It's like, oh, I have to trust this company? Okay, then you could trust a company just by using certificates, like regular SSL certificates, HTTPS, and a secure database connection. Why do you have to burn up the planet to convince me that, what this company is telling me is true, if you've decided to trust the company anyway? Right?
Yeah.
So
it's just...
Slash,
it's just to get more footfall.
Yeah, slash this week's Tech Cynics Web3 rant is over. Our weekly Web3 rant. Hopefully this is entertaining enough for you guys to stick around and listen to us do this week after week. But it's just that week after week there is some story that shows up and just like,
that's unavoidable for us to not talk about.
Moving on to our next stories. I feel like I'm done with Web3 stories for this week. So we'll
this week we're done with the Web3 and NFTs and metaverse and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I think just before we move to not what we have is very little automotive news for this week. Honestly, it's a couple of things. Fisker, we spoke about Fisker setting up their HQ in Hyderabad last week. Okay. They've just announced a third model that they're going to be rolling out called the Ronin.
Okay,
looks really sick.
All right,
they're going back to their days of the Karma. It's
nice.
a convertible with 600 miles of range.
Looks kind of Aston Martin miles of range.
Well, it's
long. Maybe that's
Karma.
Why. Yeah, I see. Yeah, the Fisker Karma.
Yeah, and it's also got some of the Lucid Air in the front end. I think a little bit.
Interesting.
Anyway, the interesting point here is more than design and more than what they're aiming for is 600 miles of range in a coupe convertible.
I see.
That's not a lot of real estate to put a lot of batteries. How are they going to do that?
Yeah. I don't know how much
of convertible is not best for aero, so I'm assuming they did that 600 mile projection with closed top.
That's true as well. So you bring up a really important point. There's a couple of these issues with EVs, and yes, range anxiety is a big one. But I've heard a lot of pushback from like pro EV enthusiasts, and the main thing that they want to say is nobody is driving 600 miles on a single charge, right? You have to think about it in terms of like no human can possibly sit through 600 miles.
Well, we're not necessarily saying 600 miles in a stretch. It's just about opting to charge in between.
I understand that. And I don't know, like these really humongous range claims. Like I'll agree that there are issues with range, especially with the nascent EV market back in India. Range anxiety is real, and it's a problem, especially with stop and go traffic to some extent with the Nexons and the fact that we don't have good charging infrastructure back in India. In the US and other like developed EV markets, I don't think that range anxiety is as much of an issue. So that's going to be interesting, and we definitely have to take any sort of like these tall claims, especially by sort of like, I know Fisker is not technically a startup, but they are a startup in the EV space. Anybody making tall claims of enhanced range?
I mean, they had the Karma, right? So they had the Karma before Tesla. It's a big boom.
That's true.
They're not really a startup, but they're a very low scale producer, if anything.
Yeah, but these tall range claims are kind of like, I don't know.
Speaking of tall range, Mercedes EQXX, I believe.
Okay.
They've just proven, not just talks, they've proven that they can do 1,000 miles on a charge.
Okay.
And in fact, they had about 10 to 15% of battery life left on that.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just pulling them up actually.
So EQXX. So they did a cross-country or countries tour recently where they've proven that their claim of 1,000 kilometers is not as per testing standards and as per staged environment to make that happen. It's regular usage and regular driving conditions. Wow. So that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Like that could be.
Yeah. They could just take that battery, throw it into the EQG. And have half the range
because it's the aero thing, right? So it's a very slippery looking car anyway. So
I see. It reminds me of like a really fancy bar of soap actually. I see. So the gains are aerodynamic basically. Yeah,
I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
I mean that's what they're claiming.
That makes sense.
More EV news, more barn fires, more EV fires to talk about.
This is almost weekly.
More fires to talk about in India.
Almost a weekly topic we cover. We've become that podcast that just talks about EVs burning. Yeah.
This is what you're pulling up there is the epitome of how things can go wrong. Is just some dude burning his scooter because he got pissed off.
Willingly, we need to clarify. We need to clarify.
It wasn't like the scooter imploded or started catching on fire by itself. This dude just straight up got pissed off with rage and
so apparently an Ola S1
added fuel to the fire.
Yes. Are you done with the jokes? All right.
Yes,
so an Ola S1 Pro. Yeah, it's too easy. Ola S1 Pro customer in Tamil Nadu apparently took his scooter out for a drive and then hit 44 kilometers. And then his scooter died of a charge. I think, like, if I read into the story and speculate a bit, what happened when his scooter died of charge was maybe he had this muscle memory of like, oh, let me just take a bottle and go to the nearest petrol pump and then get some petrol. But then realize, oh no, I can't actually fill up the scooter with petrol. So now the scooter is now like a dead weight. So he goes, he fills up a bottle with petrol anyways, and then just pours it over his scooter and then burns it in anger.
Yeah. There's an interview of that person. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
Well, he did that. He got famous. Okay.
Yeah, it's cool.
On a scooter, get famous.
Yeah, all right. As part of this discussion, apparently there was some research going on by one of the independent news organizations in India. I want to say it was The Wire, but apparently Ola is now trying to fight back any negative sort of press about their scooters in general catching fire or other issues by employing Twitter bots. So apparently there's some
interesting.
Yeah, apparently
Ola Electric using troll accounts to go after customers complaining about poor quality. Yeah, there was an article on Car Talk.
Yeah, on Car Talk and a couple of other news websites. I have something from ABP about Ola Electric is using Twitter bots to downplay grievances and correct its image, and they're kind of like troll-ish, according to a report. So apparently, pardon the pun, but Ola is trying to fight fire with fire. Couldn't help myself with more puns there, but yeah.
So they're doing a car soon enough. So it's just come out that they've hired or onboarded the person who's designed some other popular cars from last year, the Mahindra XUV 700 design. Might be
the 700
designing the. So I've actually test driven this car. It's pretty good. Yeah. But the only thing I have to say, I mean, it's got ADAS, right? So that was pretty impressive about that price point. That I experienced adaptive cruise control and emergency braking and all that stuff. It's pretty good for India. And when I test drove it, that's the only thing that I really appreciated was what's different at that price point. However, a big negative that goes on, it's totally off topic for now, but just because we're talking about the XUV, the petrol powertrain that it has is very potent, right? It's got enough go for something that juice you're going to use in India. But it sounded like a diesel for whatever reason. Like I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out what's going on with these engines. Like it's not refined at all, and nobody's talking about it.
There's this issue with, in general, like all of these Indian manufacturers, and everybody will tell you about NVH, which is noise, vibration, and harshness. Like going from any segment, right? Like whether you're talking about scooters. The reason why the Honda Activa does so well is just about how refined that engine is within that chassis. And in spite of Bajaj owning KTM or TVS being in the scooter market for years and years, there's just something about Japanese engine designs that they're able to...
Korean for that matter.
Korean or Japanese, as opposed to the Indian manufacturers and their engines. Volkswagen for that matter, right? They're like a budget European brand compared to other luxury brands, but their NVH levels and their quality levels compared to, and all of these are still made in India. There's a big R&D gap between these established manufacturers and the Indian manufacturers. And definitely the Indian manufacturers are stepping up their game. Like the XUV 500 or the 500, when it was first introduced, like it has hideous panel gaps, hideous interior inconsistencies with interior panel gaps.
It's the global SUV from Mahindra. I still remember they marketed it as the global SUV at the time.
Yeah. And, they've definitely improved on those things, but there was things about engine refinement. Like, I think the king when it comes to that stuff is Honda. The refinement levels that Honda has, even at the cheapest levels, like even if you buy an Amaze or, just how refined their engines are when it comes to vibration and noise is just astounding and very difficult for like Indian manufacturers to replicate. Yeah,
which is weird because all the R&D is happening, everything else is sorted out. I'm telling you, it would have been a non-issue if it's like slightly there and I could have dealt with it. But it was to the point that I was at the showroom and then I told the guy, hey, I want to test drive the petrol variant and let's go take a look at it. I want to check it out. And then we went over and then I started driving this thing. As soon as I turned it on, I was like, are you sure this isn't a diesel? He's like, no, it's petrol.
That's how noticeable it was.
Fine.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, fine, let's move. I started driving it. More and more I drove it. And because it's turbocharged, it's a bit torquey. It's sort of the same torque levels you expect out of a diesel, right?
Yeah, sure.
I was like, okay, more and more convinced that this is a diesel. I come back all the way to the showroom. I'm like, I'm telling you, man, this is not a petrol engine. It's a diesel. It's so noisy and so rattly that
that's
I was
amazing.
Convinced. And the only way I could figure it out, and he was confused too, because he wasn't sure. He was new there, so fair enough. But the only way I could figure it out was opening the fuel filler cap, and it said petrol over there. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm wrong.
Wow. Was just bad engine mount or like, I don't know.
No, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't bad. Okay, comfort levels were very good. It was just the noise. You know that clattery noise that diesel has?
Yeah. The diesel clattering.
Very similar.
Oh, wow.
Very similar.
Wow.
I was surprised because everything else about the car really amazed me. Like for an Indian product, the interiors were on point. It was premium. It wasn't like the Tata Safari kind of, let's make do with whatever we had a Harrier with and then just do a little bit better, right? Yeah. It wasn't this Tata levels of things. It was much better. Audio was really good. Comfort was really good. A lot of space, plastics used, soft touch materials, everything's really good. Even the digital displays that they have with the S-Class looking
Merc inspired,
the twin displays, everything was good. It's just this that put me off. I was like, immediately, and like, okay, cool. Immediately I get the feel of driving something not that refined. Which made me doubt the reliability in long term.
I'm seeing a lot of reports on Team BHP about this as well as the Harrier. Yeah, in general, these ownership niggles are bad enough that people are willing to like say, you know what, I'll delay the my pickup. Like I know that I put an advance amount to do the booking in, but find somebody else to sell this car to. I don't want it yet. I want to wait for a few more software revisions and a few more. Yeah. Like I'm hearing a lot of experiences from individual sellers who are talking about these kinds of issues too. So that's interesting.
I was equally surprised by the Thar as well. Since I was there, I might as well check it out as well. Looks like a Wrangler outside, but it's not Wrangler.
Yeah.
Much to
the chagrin of Jeep, right? Because it's one of those weird issues.
Wooden brake feel, all of that happening.
Okay. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. Last topic for automotive. Will.i.am. He's a designer also. I mean, we know him for music, but also for design. He's just he's just had a custom AMG designed, which is inspired. Well, I should clarify. It's an AMG coupe, which is inspired off of a G-Class. Okay. So it's a G-Class coupe, which is also kind of like an AMG GT at the back.
Oh, wow.
And look at that. It's got Will.i.am. Will.i.am.
Right? Will.i.am. Oh, with so AMG as well. GT. Okay, I see.
It's an AMG GT, and then the front of it looks like a G-Class.
Oh, I see. It's got a little bit of like a Rolls-Royce thing going too, right? Like kind of like the
I mean, I guess that part where your cursor is at, right?
Yep. Around the lights. There's a bit of a boxification of the lights.
Squared off.
Squared
that's
off.
G-class, but the edge of the middle there,
the way that it plays with the side of the car kind of looks reminiscent of Rolls Royce as well. Interesting. Will.i.am.
So Will.i.am has always been doing all these crazy things, and he's kind of like the polished Shaq when it comes to Pimp My Ride. Have you seen all the Shaq mobiles from West Coast Customs?
Oh my God, no! I haven't seen Pimp My Ride in so long. Oh, there's a picture of like the whole AMG.
I don't think that's it.
Oh, I see. These are other.
It's a blend
AMG.
of those two.
Yeah, I see. Interesting.
You might want to do a quick Google of sharing just to find a better picture. But anyway, Will.i.am is in news that way. I think that was it for today's podcast. Unless I think that's right on time and on brand. And hopefully you guys enjoyed my sort of experiences with the SteamDeck, and hopefully it becomes more generally available in the next couple of months. But I'm waiting for one.
Yeah, like what do you think? In like just quick circle back to that topic, like at that price point, do you think it'll find buyers in like markets like India, for example?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, because that's a lot of money.
Because it's not more than a Switch. Why would you go buy a Switch?
That's true. Also, with the potential of you playing games, any game without having to, go buy them. I'm not saying that that's what you should do, but it's possible.
No. We do not endorse that.
We don't endorse that. We do not endorse that. Yeah. But that's interesting. Oh wow. We'll have to see how things.
No, I know I would get one because just purely based on like same story as you, right? So you have a certain amount of games as your collection, and you have a library already. And a lot of the times, PC games are cheaper to buy in than console games. It's simple, right? So Epic always does free games. Steam always does sales. It's always easy to find a cheaper free game compared to a console on PC. So this is probably a better bet for most people.
And opening up more opportunities for you to enjoy your games without having to like make the time and sit in front of a gaming desktop or a gaming machine. Yeah. Definitely. Like, I hope this convinces developers to kind of like. First of all, it doesn't take a lot for developers to support their games on the deck either, right? Like usually the community might just, if it's popular enough, the community will take up the effort of like setting up the control mappings and things like that. So we'll see how things go.
I'll tell you, I'm not so worried about the software and the implementation part of it. I'm more worried about after-sales support, similar to what Google has, right? So we spoke about Google quite a bit of time. So it's the same story. Like if Valve does release in India, like how are they equipped to drive that after-sales support? They're not. Let's be honest. Like,
they're not. Yeah. They'll have to.
I guess the device is small enough to ship it out and then for them to ship it back to you at their cost. But
they'll have to team up with some kind of like B2X developer. Like the good thing is the repairability is high, so they'd have to just set up a good like parts supply chain. Because they wouldn't have to. Yeah, they wouldn't have to do too much like training of people.
It's kind of like a PC thing, right?
Yeah, in that sense, yeah. Or just having a good part supply chain and allowing user repairability with caveats, right? Like, I think that it's definitely a prosumer market and things like that. So we'll have to see how things go. But hopefully they can get enough of those into other emerging markets like India as well. All right. And with that, I guess that's the end of this podcast for today. Thanks for joining us, guys, and hope you stick around for the next one. Peace.
Thanks for joining us on episode 6.